Hey, what is going on, guys? It's DK. Back at you with another video here to ready on week 1 of the NFL season on Draftkings. Really excited to be talking some football, some NFL football again. If you guys are new to the channel, my name's DK. I make daily videos breaking down NBA, NFL, PGA, and esports, daily fantasy sports slates. Before I get into the analysis here, I do want to say thank you again for all support. Currently, right now at 4.5 thousand subscribers. My goal right now is to try to hit 6,000 by the end of September, so a little over a month. The easiest way to support me, since all the content is currently free, is just leave a like button on the video, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell just so you know when I upload videos, you know when I go live. I will be live streaming for NFL, I will be live streaming for Showdown slates as well. A lot of you guys are familiar with NBA, where I do live streams, but I will be doing NFL live streams as well. Also, if you cannot watch the YouTube videos, I do upload on Apple Podcasts. The link is in the description below, which is the DK DFS show. But with that out of the way, let's jump into the video. Sorry, I can't talk. So, before we get into players and the prices for Week 1, let's take a look at the Vegas odds for this game. So, that Houston-Kansas City game will be obviously a great game to watch, but that is not included on the Sunday main slate. So, we have the Browns and the Ravens. The 48.5 over/under. The Ravens are 8.5-point favorites. We have the Packers, Vikings, the 46 over/under. Minnesota 3-point favorites. We have the Raiders, Las Vegas now, and the Panthers 47 over/under. Raiders 1.5-point favorites. I kind of like the over in this game. I think both defenses are really bad. So that's a game I do like targeting right now. Dolphins, Patriots is a 43 over/under. Pats are 6-point favorites. We have the Jets, the Bills, a 40 over/under. The Bills are 6-point favorites. Eagles and now the Washington football team, no longer the Washington Redskins. Eagles are 6-point favorites. It's a 44 over/under. Seahawks Falcons is a 49 over/under. Seahawks are 1-point favorites. We have the Chargers and the Bengals, a 44 over/under. Chargers are 3-point favorites, and the Cardinals 49ers 47 over/under. 49ers are 7-point favorites, and finally Bucks Saints a 49.5 over/under. Currently the highest of the slate. Saints 3.5-point favorites. So let's just jump into it. We'll start with quarterback, and we'll start at the top, Lamar Jackson. So not a whole lot of downside to say about him. 8.1K I think is a very fair price point. He's a guy that obviously you got to love targeting. He has such a high floor with his rushing ability. He definitely is a guy that can go for 100 yards on the ground. So the upside is really high in Lamar Jackson. The matchup against Cleveland is solid. They should be able to, they should be playing from ahead. They're 8.5-point favorites. There's really nothing bad to say about him. I think the only slight worry is maybe they get off to a really big lead, maybe like a 2 to 3 touchdown lead, and then they just pound the ball on the ground. I guess that's a slight concern, right? But it's just, if you can get to Lamar Jackson, there's really nothing bad to say about him at 8.1K. So I think he's certainly in play for cash games. Normally, I'm a guy that likes paying down a quarterback, but just the floor is so high, you basically get a running back out of Lamar Jackson, plus, obviously, get points for throwing the ball, too. So I think he's certainly in play in cash, and definitely in play for GPPs. I think he'll be popular, but for good reason. Russell Wilson's at about $1,000 less. He's at 7K. Really good matchup here against Atlanta. This is another game that looks pretty appealing. I think this one is definitely game stackable. Two defenses that aren't great, Seattle and Atlanta. Russ Wilson, he had a great year last year. He's another guy that, doesn't have the rushing capabilities of Lamar Jackson, but he can get you like 50 yards on the ground and a touchdown. So the floor is, still somewhat high in Russ Wilson. And like I said, it's a really good matchup against Atlanta. I'm not afraid of the Falcons defensively. So Russell Wilson at 7K, I think looks pretty solid. And then we get Drew Brees at 6.8. DraftKings did a really good job pricing, the Week 1 players here. I think 6.8 seems about right. This game definitely has potential for a shootout, right? It's currently the highest over/under of the week. So I have no issue with if you get to Drew Brees. I don't know if I'm going to necessarily get there in cash games, but I think he's certainly viable. And if you wanted a lower owned, stack, you can use him with Michael Thomas. I don't think Michael Thomas can be that high owned just because he's really, really expensive. Let's see. Matt Ryan is at 6'7". With him and Russell Wilson being so close, I might just give the edge there to Russell Wilson over Matt Ryan. Just because of the floor, right? Russell Wilson has a slightly higher floor because he can run the ball. Matt Ryan's not a guy that's really going to get you a lot of yards on the ground. Like I said, this game is definitely game stackable, and 6'7" seems fair. If I was going to pick a QB in this game, though, I think I might give the edge to Russell Wilson there. Tom Brady's at 6'5". So this is the big unknown. Like, how is that offense going to look? They do want to air it out. His floor was, he didn't have a great year last year because New England is playing from ahead in a lot of those games. And they just didn't need to do a whole lot offensively. Like they would get off to early leads and just pound the rock. I don't know if they can necessarily do that here with this Tampa Bay team. So I have interest in Tom Brady. I don't think he's a cash game play, but interesting contrarian play. Don't think a lot of people get to him. Again, kind of the same thing with Wilson and Matt Ryan. I might prefer Drew Brees. I think he's slightly safer than Tom Brady right now. Let's see. Josh Allen's at 6'5", another guy that definitely has that floor because of his rushing ability. Was a little bit inaccurate as a passer last year. The matchup's okay. This game could be ugly, though. Jets, Bills. I think he's solid, but I'm probably not going to prioritize getting Josh Allen in my lineup, at least for week 1. Kyler Murray, if you guys watched my NFL videos last year, you guys knew I was all about Kyler Murray. I'm a huge Kyler Murray fan. The matchup obviously is terrible against San Francisco. So no one's going to play him. I don't think you play him in cash games. But I do kind of like him as a contrarian play in GPPs. Just because Arizona is a team that's going to spread it out. They're going to run 4 wide sets basically the whole game. And their defense is not good. That's something that's not talked about a lot in the DFS community is having a bad defense, in my opinion, for a quarterback is good. Because they're going to have to put up points to stay in games, right? They're not going to be playing from ahead a lot. So he'll be playing a lot of the time in negative game script, having to pass it a bunch. Now, he wasn't as efficient, but I think the offensive line improves a bit here. Obviously, they did get DeAndre Hopkins too in the offseason. So Kyler Murray is a guy that I like in GPPs. I think people just avoid him because of the matchup. Obviously, the matchup scares me. But if you look at his games against San Francisco last year, he went for 23 and 26 fantasy points, which you'll take that all day at 6'4". Another guy that, again, has that rushing ability too, can definitely get you one on the ground. So I like Kyler just for GPPs, though definitely not a cash game play. Wentz is a guy that I think will be popular at 6'3". I think he's going to be somewhat popular in cash. We'll definitely garner some ownership at GPPs. The matchup's good against Washington. My concern here is maybe Philly gets off to an early lead and then they just pound the rock. That's a slight concern, like I mentioned, with a guy like Lamar Jackson. I think he's solid. I think he really is solid. You can probably pair him if you wanted to. I know not a lot of people like doing it, but you could pair him with Miles Sanders if he's going to be available because he's a guy that can catch the ball a lot out of the backfield. So I think Wentz right now will be pretty popular in cash, and I have no issue other than, I think there's a slight chance that might get off to a big lead, and then, the game script won't be good for Carson Wentz. Aaron Rodgers at 6'3", I'm probably going to pass for now. Just the matchup against Minnesota, I don't really know if I want to go there. The price seems fair, but you can't, really target everyone. Kind of the same thing with Matt Stafford at 6'2". Cam Newton's at 6'1". Hasn't officially won the starting job yet, but all signs are pointing to him being the starting quarterback in week 1. Had a rough year last year, obviously only playing 2 games and then got injured. He's a guy that does, he can run the ball a bit too. It's a tricky one. I like the matchup here for against Miami too. So I think Cam Newton is pretty solid. I think he'll be somewhat popular too in the mid-range. Phillip Rivers is probably past me at 6K. Now, Bridgewater's a guy that I'm pretty high in at 5'9". I really like this game. Carolina and Las Vegas is probably my favorite game to target as far as game stacks just because the pricing looks pretty good for a lot of these guys. This is a game that, again, I want exposure to. And Bridgewater is a guy that can rush the football. Obviously, we haven't seen him play a whole lot of games recently. But I like the upside here on Teddy Bridgewater, especially in this spot. So at 5'9", he's definitely one of my favorite targets right now on the slate. Don't mind Derek Carr, but the same situation there with Russell Wilson and Matt Ryan. I prefer Wilson slightly with Drew Brees and Tom Brady. I slightly prefer Drew Brees. Same thing here with Bridgewater and Derek Carr. I don't think Derek Carr's out of play. I think I just slightly give the edge there to Teddy Bridgewater. I think both are viable at under 6K for sure. Minshew's at 5'8", a guy that can get you some rushing yards on the ground, so the floor is somewhat high in him. I think I like the quarterbacks just above him there with Bridgewater and Derek Carr a little bit more. Joe Burrow, I don't think will be that high owned. Obviously the unknown is there because we haven't seen him yet play for the Bengals. So maybe just a GPP play. Jimmy G's at 5'8". The issue with Jimmy G is San Francisco loves running the football. So he didn't have a whole lot of big games last year just because they would get off to early leads. They could rely on their defense and they just pound the football. So the matchup's really good against Arizona, but I don't know if I'm going to prioritize Jimmy G on this slate. Kirk Cousins at 5'7", I think is viable. The price looks decent. That's about it. I don't think I'm going to get to Baker in a tougher spot. I mean, you could use a Baker. Odell looks really good on the slate, so if you wanted to go that stack, you could. But I don't know if I'm going to go out of my way to play Baker. Tyrod Taylor, another guy that has upside on the ground. The matchup's solid. I don't think a lot of people get to him, so he's an interesting, cheaper option too that I think is in play. Probably not going to get to Sam Darnold or whoever starts for Chicago, whether it be Trubisky or Nick Foles. Fitzpatrick is a guy that probably will get some ownership just because of the price tag. He's a guy that will throw the ball a lot. Miami's probably going to be playing from behind a lot once again this season. They're not projected to be great. So at 5.3K, I actually think he's a viable play, assuming he wins the starting job, which I think he will over Tua for now. So that's it for quarterback. Let's talk about running back. We have Christian McCaffrey at 10K. He's a guy that's going to be super, super popular in cash games. Again, for cash games, I think you play him even at 10K and move on just because the floor is so, so high with him and his receptions. Yeah, so like I said, CMC is a guy that I think is going to be very, very popular, but in cash, you play and move on. For GPPs, he's fadeable because 10K is a lot, and there's other running backs that have upside. So GPPs, I don't think he's a must play, but yeah, cash games, it's probably plug and play for me. Dalvin Cook's at 7.9. I think is the worry with him is just the holdout, but looks like he probably will be good to go for week 1. If that's the case, I think he makes for an interesting contrarian play because, like I said, everyone's going to go to McCaffrey at the top, so it's just going to make the guys right below him harder to get to on a slate like this. So Dalvin Cook is viable. Obviously, he's a guy that can catch a lot of balls too, and I think he goes lower owned, assuming that he does obviously start week 1. Kamara at 7.2, so he was dealing with injuries all last year. They said he was playing with an MCL tear. The issue with Kamara is just the usage, right? He won't get like 20 carries a game ever because they have Latavius Murray. But the floor is pretty high because of those receptions, full point PPR too. So Kamara's a guy that I kind of like. It's a game that you're probably going to want some exposure to. Tampa Bay, New Orleans. Again, the highest over under currently of the week. So Kamara's a guy that I do have interest in. I also really like Austin Eckler at 7K. Great matchup against Cincinnati. And we have no Melvin Gordon. So he was putting up good numbers last year when Gordon was playing. Now he's the go-to guy. So sure, Tyrod Taylor from Phillip Rivers to Tyrod Taylor might be a slight downgrade at QB, and maybe Tyrod Taylor doesn't utilize Eckler as much because Phillip Rivers just loved dumping it to the running backs. But if he's going to be their workhorse back at 7K in this matchup, I think Eckler looks really, really good. And I don't know if he's going to be that high owned. Aaron Jones at 6.9 against Minnesota. Well, let's just talk about his season last year. So he had 23 touchdowns. Definitely an outlier for a season, in my opinion. That kind of boosted his fantasy appeal. He had a lot of games where he had multiple touchdowns. His usage is obviously there. The matchup does worry me a bit, though. Like, I'm not super excited about playing teams or players against Minnesota. Jacobs at 6'8", is their workhorse back. The issue with him is not going to be utilized a whole lot in the passing game. Right, so he's a guy that can definitely get you 20-plus carries. It's a good matchup, too, against Carolina. Again, I think you want some exposure to this game. So Jacobs is solid, but my worry is just no passing game usage from him. Mixon's at 6'7". He's been absent the last few practices. We've got to keep an eye on it because he's a guy that if he plays, I think looks pretty solid, but could open up some value. Again, we'll talk about that more in a bit. So Nick Chubb is not a guy that I'm super excited about targeting because he just doesn't get utilized at all in the passing game. And this is a game that Cleveland's projected to be playing from behind in. And they have a guy like Kareem Hunt that they'll utilize in the passing game. So it worries me with Nick Chubb. Probably be a stay away from me. Kenyon Drake is interesting at 6'4", just because, the Arizona running back last year was, utilized a whole lot, whether it was David Johnson early in the year or obviously Kenyon Drake later in the year. And again, I want pieces to this offense. It's just one of the worst possible spots. So I don't think you completely avoid these Cardinals guys, but I think they're only in play for GPPs. Now, Miles Sanders, he's a guy I think will be very popular, assuming he's good to go week 1. There's been so much hype around him. Everyone in the DFS community loves him. I think he'll be very popular. The one concern is just Philly loves using a running back by committee, but you got to assume they're going to, give most of the carries to Miles Sanders. So, and it's a really good matchup against Washington. They should be playing from ahead, too. He obviously is a guy that can catch balls in the backfield. So I do like Miles Sanders quite a bit. I think him and CMC right now are going to be very popular in cash. Carson at 6'2". It's a great spot against Atlanta. My concern is not utilized a whole lot in the passing game, but if they're playing from ahead, like they will give Chris Carson the ball 20-plus times. So I think he's certainly in play at 6'2". Gurley, the worry with him is just the injuries, right, and him not being completely himself. Offense coordinator said at least 15 touches per game, upside of 25. So, we'll see. Right now, the workload is kind of in question. But if he's a guy that could push for 20-plus touches at 6'1", obviously he's a guy that he will be utilized a bunch in the passing game. Like, I think he could be viable week 1. I don't think a lot of people get to him. Obviously, again, the concern, the injuries. Maybe they limit him a bit to start the season. But if everything goes right for Gurley and we get like 20 to 25 touches in a game that, should have or does have potential to shoot out, I think Gurley actually looks like a pretty viable option. James White is too expensive at 6K. Fournette's interesting at 6K to me. He's a guy that a lot of people have been down on, at least for season long. But I still think he's a viable back. He is a workhorse back. We utilize a bunch on the ground. He's a guy that can catch footballs too, right? So I think Fournette's interesting at 6K, just because I don't think a lot of people get to him. The concern is they did bring in Chris Thompson, so maybe they'll utilize him a bit in the passing downs. Montgomery's at 5'9", good matchup here against Detroit, but he is now expected to be out 2 to 4 weeks. That happened, I believe, today. Yeah, so this is pretty big. Could open up potential value there for a guy like Tariq Cohen, but are they really going to want to utilize him a whole lot on the ground? So that's something to keep an eye on for sure. Mostert, my worry with him is San Francisco used like a 3-headed monster last year running back, and they just took turns. They would go with a hot hand. So they had games where Tevin Coleman completely, took all the work from the San Francisco team. So that does worry me, and the fact that they don't utilize them at all in the passing game. The positive is it's a really good matchup. Le'Veon Bell's at 5'6". I actually think is a viable play here. It's just a price point thing with him for me. Jets, not projected to be great this year. The matchup is not amazing against Buffalo, but he's a guy that will be out there most of the game, and the floor is somewhat high due to his pass-catching abilities. And 5'6" just seems a little bit too cheap. Like, he was a guy that was in the 7 to 8K range last year, so I think Le'Veon actually looks really solid as a cash game option right now. Mark Ingram's at 5'5". My issue with him is not a guy they're going to utilize a whole lot in the passing game, and they're not going to give him like 20-plus touches a game. The positives are this is a game Baltimore should be playing from ahead in, and he definitely has upside to get you a touchdown or two here. So he's a guy that I probably won't get to in cash for the reason of they're not going to give him a whole lot of carries, and he doesn't get utilized a lot in the passing game. But I think he is in play for GPPs because he's a guy that could break off, one or two touchdowns, and they should be playing from ahead. Singletary's at 5.4. The issue is he's still not going to be a workhorse for Buffalo, so I'll probably take a wait-and-see approach there. Marlon Mack, kind of the same thing. They have Jonathan Taylor. I'll pass. The Tampa Bay running backs is a stay away from me. I'm not going to get to the Miami running backs either with Howard or Breida. Kareem Hunt, 5.1 seems a little bit too expensive. I know they should be playing from behind in this one, which should be good for Kareem Hunt, but 5.1 is you're not getting him at a discount. J.K. Dobbins, is at 5K. He's been impressing as a receiver. He will get work, right? He'll be working behind Mark Ingram, but again, not getting a huge discount either. So do you really want to take the shot there? Cohen could be viable here at 4.9, especially if Montgomery's out. But are they really going to utilize him a lot on the ground? So could make a guy like Ryan Nall, whoever would pick up a start there for Chicago if Montgomery can't go. Boston Scott could become viable if Miles Sanders is not available. The good thing about DraftKings, I think they made running backs, the minimum 4K. So you're no longer going to get those 3K punt plays that are just like plug and plays if like a couple guys are out. So I think that is good due to COVID, obviously, and potential for a lot of guys missing games due to that. Where was I? So I'm not going to get to Rashard. Sony Michel's at 4.6. This doesn't get utilized at all in the passing game. I don't think I want to go there. Latavius, not for me. I'm not getting into Carlos Hyde or AP. Carrion is intriguing at 4.4 if he wins the starting job in Detroit. It's not guaranteed right now. I know the matchup's not great, but if we get like 70% of the touches for Carrion Johnson at 4.4, he's a guy that does have ability to catch footballs out of the backfield. So slight interest just because of the price point. Obviously, the matchup's not great. And that's it for running back. I will probably have a video up breaking down, going a little bit more in-depth for running backs. I'll probably have one up for wide receivers and tight ends too. So that's really it. Let's talk about wide receivers again. Michael Thomas at 9K, just a contrarian play right now for GPPs because of the price point. Hard to get to, definitely not a cash game play. Obviously, the upside is there with him. He's one of the best, if not the best receivers right now in the league. Julio Jones at 7.7. Again, probably not a cash game play. My cash strategy usually is get three running backs in my lineup, and running backs are going to be utilized a lot, and then spend down at wide receiver. Now that depends slate to slate, right? There's a lot of really good cheap running backs, and obviously things change, but that's my strategy for week one, assuming there's no great value, but there could be a value again opening up with injuries, COVID stuff for running backs. So obviously something to keep an eye on there. Devontae Adams at 7.3. I know the matchup isn't great, but he's just a guy that has such a high floor because the targets, right? He's going to get double-digit targets almost every single week. I think he's a viable GPP play. Godwin and Evans, if you want to pair one of those guys with Brady, I don't hate that idea. I don't know if they're going to be super high owned, but yeah, I think both are in play. The issue with Tampa Bay, they have a lot of mouths to feed, right? They have Godwin, Mike Evans, Gronk. They even still have OJ Howard. So a lot of guys that are going to want the football. DeAndre Hopkins at 6.8. Yeah, I don't hate the idea of pairing him with Kyler Murray in GPPs. This is a pretty cheap price point. I know the matchup was not great, but I kind of like that stack as a low-owned stack. Thielen at 6.7 I think will be somewhat popular just because no Stephon Diggs. He is their clear number one receiver right now. It's a decent matchup here against Green Bay too. So for the price point, for the targets, I think Thielen looks pretty solid right now. DJ Moore's at 6.6. Again, I want exposure to this game. I think he looks pretty solid if you want to pair him with Teddy Bridgewater. Bridgewater is one of my favorite running back, or one of my favorite quarterbacks for week one. So I think DJ Moore looks pretty solid. I'm not going to talk about everyone here at the wide receiver. Again, I'll have another video up breaking that down for individual running backs, for wide receivers, and tight ends. Let's see. Other options that I'm slightly interested in here. Let's see. Galladay's at 6.2. The price isn't bad, but you don't feel great about targeting players against Chicago. I think Ridley looks pretty good at 6.1. He's their clear number 2 guy. He had a lot of games where he had upside last year. Again, this is a great matchup too against Seattle. So this is a game that is definitely game stackable, and the 6-1 price point looks pretty fair for Calvin Ridley. So I think he looks pretty solid for his price. Edelman, don't mind him at 6K. The floor is somewhat high just because he's a guy that will be utilized a lot. Obviously, you're going to have a new quarterback there, assuming it's going to be Cam Newton, but he's a guy that the targets usually are pretty high on him, and I don't think the defense will be as good this year. So I think Edelman looks pretty decent. Odell, I think, will be very popular at 5.9, but it's for good reason. You're not playing Odell because of the matchup here. You're just playing him because of the price point. 5.9K just seems too cheap. He said he was dealing with injuries last year. He's feeling a lot better. I just think he looks solid because of the price. DK Metcalf's another guy I like. He was a guy that was utilized a whole lot in the red zone. And, the 5.8K price looks pretty solid. Like, where the targets are going to for Seattle, right? It's Lockett, it's Metcalf. Makes for a nice stack if you want to pair him with Russ Wilson. So I do like DK Metcalf quite a bit going into his year 2. I think the upside is massive on him. Other options, like, are you going to buy into AJ Green? Can he stay healthy is the big question. He's still dealing with injuries, so it's just a risk. He's getting up there in age too. Other options, let's see. Again, I'll have a video going more in depth on some of these wide receivers. Deshaun Jackson's a guy I think will be popular. The issue with him is just his age. He's 33, but Philly is super, super depleted at wide receiver. So I think Deshaun Jackson is a guy that will be popular. And I think it's for good reason. Like, they don't have anyone else really that's going to eat up a lot of targets. So I think he looks pretty solid. Let's see. Justin Jefferson, if he wins the starting job, could become viable here at 4.8, would be the number 2 receiver. But right now it is what's his name? Olabisi Johnson. Where is Minnesota? So right now it's Olabisi Johnson that has been working with the starting unit. If he is their number 2 guy, I think he would become a viable punt option too. So whoever does end up winning that starting job for Minnesota would become a viable cheap option. Let's see. Curtis Samuel is interesting. If the talk right now is they're going to utilize him more in the slot, which I think is actually good because he was utilized this on those big plays last year. He would just run, the long routes. They wouldn't utilize him a whole lot. So maybe they use him more here, and the price looks decent. It's a good matchup. I have a little bit of interest there. Fitz at 4.5. I mean, the price is playable even in a tough spot. Let's see. I think that's about it for now. Again, I'll have another video up going more in depth with all the wide receivers. Let's finish it up with tight end here. George Kittle's at 7.2. Not a guy I'm going to look to for cash. Again, I usually always spend down on tight end and cash. The positive here is the amazing matchup. You do want to target, tight ends against Arizona. So he's a guy that is viable for GPP. He's definitely not a cash play. Mark Andrews, the issue with him is still won't utilize a whole lot. They said they're gonna increase his snap count, but by how much? Right? He was only utilizing 41% of the snaps, so the upside is there. But I think more still the boom or bust play. I think Waller looks pretty solid at 5.9. He's my favorite target right now for Las Vegas. He's a red zone target. He's a guy that can definitely get you, a touchdown or 2 even. Like, he will be utilized a lot down in the red zone. And again, this is a game that I think could shoot out 2 bad defenses. I like Darren Waller a good amount there in the mid-range. I think Zach Ertz looks pretty solid. The issue with him is just the injuries, but great match against Washington. He's a guy that will be utilized a lot just because Washington receiving core is pretty depleted right now. So I think Zach Ertz looks pretty good. Other options, I think Gronk is viable at 4.9. It's unknown because we didn't see him at all last year, but signs are pointing to him looking pretty solid. And this is obviously a really, really cheap price tag on Gronkowski, so it's a good matchup too. I have interest. I think more of a GPP play, but I do like some Gronk. Gesicki, Miami is pretty depleted. I think you could use like a him and Ryan Fitzpatrick stack. to save some money. I don't think that's the worst idea. The last couple games of the season was utilized a lot. 12 and 7 targets, 8 targets the game before that. So I think he's a viable, cheaper option. I like Hayden Hurst quite a bit at 4.3. He is going to be their go-to tight end, an every down tight end for the Falcons. And you saw Austin Hooper last year had that huge year. So I think Hayden Hurst right now is my cash game play. Again, they're going to utilize him as an every down tight end. So I think he looks really good here at 4.3K. One of my favorite plays for tight end. Goddard's viable at 4.1, but if I was going to play a Philly tight end, probably would just pay the extra couple thousand there for Zach Ertz. I think Olsen's in play too at 4K. The issue with him is just he's getting up there in age, but Seattle will utilize their tight ends. And again, a good matchup here against Atlanta. So I have a little bit of interest in Olsen as a cheaper option. I think I slightly prefer Hayden Hurst, but both are guys that I'm considering. Other options, Doyle's okay at 3.6. There's no longer, what's his name? The other tight end that's I can't think of right now for the Colts, but he's no longer there. So Doyle should be like their number one guy. I think he looks okay at that price. And that's about it. Again, Chris Herndon is the last guy I'll mention at 3.3. There's a lot of hype about him going into this year. He was a guy that was dealing with a suspension and then injuries. But I like the upside quite a bit here. I know the matchup's not great, but Herndon's a guy that I do like. I don't think will be that high owned in week 1. So he is a cheap punt option that I do have a good amount of interest in. But I think that's it for now. Again, guys, I will have a video going in more depth on all the running backs, an individual video, a video for all the wide receivers, and an individual video for all the tight ends. But yeah, I think that's going to do it. So thanks again, guys, for coming to check the video. Hope you guys all have a good day. And I will see you guys all in the next video.